Is working well? Hi, Regina. Hopefully you can hear me well. Thank you, Pascal. Thank you. Paula. Hi, Paula. All right. So, first, thank you very much for being here with me on this Friday afternoon. I'm from São Paulo, but I live in Santos, and it's not a really beautiful afternoon here. It's kind of cloudy. It looks like it's gonna rain, so thank you for devoting your Friday afternoon to professional development here with me. And today we're gonna be talking about the teacher's attitude um, in decision making towards bringing grammar to the classroom. And I would like to hear from you guys here in the chat box. What is your what is your relationship with grammar? Is it like love and hate, or you like to bring grammar to the classroom, or you don't feel comfortable enough to explain grammar rules? How does that work for you? Tell me here in the chat below. And as I move forward, I'm going to be checking your answers here. Um, so let me tell you a little bit about my story with lesson planning. As most of us English teachers, we start our career with very little training, and often this very little training that we have, if any, comes from the institution in which we work for. And that was exactly what happened to me. I started working at a language center uh, back in the early 2000s. 2010 was 2009. And I had very little training, and the idea of uh, uh, um, the idea of planning lessons was a little bit scary. So what the instructions I had from the team at the time, from the coordination and the institution, was just follow the book, and everything will be fine. And I mean, that was not satisfying at all, right? Because we teachers know that sometimes following the book sequence is not the best uh, 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 sequence that our learners will benefit from, and there are many other things involved. But that's what I did, and then I started investing in my professional development. I first started with the TKT course, prep course in São Paulo back then. And I had my first contact with formal lesson planning, literally writing a lesson plan and learning lesson stages and all that. And that really uh, changed a lot the way I saw lesson planning. But yet, on a very early stage, I moved to the Celta. And if any of you have taken the Celta, you know that lesson planning is one of the core values of the course. That's why you're there. You're there to learn how to plan lessons and how to conduct a class successfully, how to master uh, um, classroom management strategies. So uh, th- th- that's why you take the Celta to become a better professional. And again, I took another big step in my lesson planning journey. I learned how to work with authentic materials and using songs and movies and TV series. It made a huge difference. Then after the SALT, I took the ISALT, which it's unfortunately it's a certification from the University of Cambridge that is not offered anymore. It used to be a step between the CELTA and the Delta, so if you're not familiar with these awards, it would be interesting to go to Cambridge's website and check it out because that can make a huge difference in your professional development. And in terms of lesson planning, I took another step further. I was when I took the CELTA, I was not very comfortable with teaching vocabulary. Excuse me, with teaching speaking and writing, and that changed completely during the ICELT. So I was able to feel more comfortable with planning lessons, planning speaking lessons, and planning writing lessons from scratch. Then the Delta, which is the highest teaching certificate. It's actually a diploma that you can take from the University of Cambridge, which is what I am working on at the moment. Then lesson planning goes to another level. So in terms of uh, um, depth, this is how it goes. And then when we compare this to what happens in the real market, the books that we have available and the materials that we have to produce, there might be a shock sometimes of what we need to do compared to what our students want, compared to what we are expected to do by the institution. And I saw a comment here from Paula. She said that she loves studying grammar, but she feels afraid that her students won't be enjoying this teaching moment in the classroom. And I can totally relate to what Paula said, because we English teachers, we are very passionate about grammar, right? We like studying grammar, we like learning how the language works, but sometimes that's not what our students come to us for. If you work with mainstream education, for example, regular schools, you have to teach grammar. If more, like let's say, in a heavier way, because they are going to have tests and so on and so forth. But if you're a private teacher, things might be a little bit more flexible. Does that make sense? Tell me here in the comments below, here in the chat box, if you can resonate with what I'm saying. And then my question is, what is the biggest struggle when we design our materials, when we plan our own lessons? Yeah? And I'm not here. It might sound I am against course books, but I'm not. I love course books. I use them. Um, but I see course books as a tool for the lessons I'm teaching, not as the lesson per se, right? So I've learned throughout the years to use course books in my favor and in favor of my students. That's why I say that designing materials, planning the lesson involves making decisions of what you are going to use from the course book. You might not need to use everything. And the biggest challenge, in my opinion, when I am designing my lessons from scratch, um, is first to understand that the process of language learning is not linear. So, if you think about the language learning process, we cannot see this as a checklist, as like simple present, check, present continuous, check, simple past, check, present perfect, check, and we never come back to these topics again. We just move forward. That's not the way we have to see language learning. I decided to put this upward spiral here in my slides because that's exactly how I see language learning happening. Imagine that every turn you take in the spiral is a level that you were studying. So think of an A1 student, a beginner student. In this first full turn, the A1 turn, they are going to learn greetings, simple presents, present continuous, the weather, common routine verbs, and then we have a full turn. When we take the second turn for A2, one plus or A2, we are going to stumble upon present continuous again, present perfect again, simple present again. But instead of saying the same thing, we will be expanding. We're going to be exploring other features of the simple present that we did not explore back at the beginning. Does that make sense? Can you see this happening in the course books in the lessons you teach? Because this was one of the difficulties that I had at the beginning. That there's so much to be taught about the present simple. How am I going to teach everything about the present simple to my students in one lesson? The answer is you don't. You won't. You don't have to teach everything about the present, everything there is about the present simple in one lesson for a number of reasons. First one, not everything in the present simple is appropriate to the level you're teaching, but also not everything in the present simple communicates the same, brings the same communicative skill. And that's going to be a lot clearer as we move on. So this is something that we also have to bear in mind when we are planning our lessons, because there's the language in the classroom and there is the language in real life. And just out of curiosity, these are portraits of the same king. So sometimes this super organized, neat, clear language that we present in the classroom to our students is very different from what happens in the real world. And then what happens to them when they are thrown to the real world to communicate, they feel frustrated because they cannot connect the language they learned with the language that they saw in the real world. So you see that all these challenges, first, the order of teaching things, what to prioritize, what not to teach, and how to teach it, what kinds of samples of language I'm teaching to my lesson. Planning a lesson is much more complex than it sounds, don't you agree? And we take that for granted just by following the course book. Just follow the course book and everything will be fine. I'm not sure that this is the best way out. Um, Another thing that we have to bear in mind is that language does not happen in a vacuum, right? When we think about the simple present, for example, w- this besides all the rules and everything that we know about the simple present, communication does not happen in the simple present only. It's not something um, that happens isolated from the world. And then there is a lot more happening around it, around the language that we are using. Yeah? And then just out of curiosity, this is a painting from medieval times, and this man here is a doctor. Is he was supposed to be a psychologist, and he's pulling the demons out of this man's brain. So I brought a lot of artistic references to this lesson, as you can see. And that's why it is important to have a wider perspective of the language you're teaching, because the language does not come alone. Yeah. And to illustrate that, I'm gonna bring it to you, the mystery of the verb to be. So I started studying English when I was really young. I was like 7 years old. And I spent my whole school life studying the verb to be. Uh, and I don't know if you've had the same experience as I did, but year after year, I was forced to memorize the verb to be. And I finished high school. If I hadn't studied English outside school years, I would have never learned what the present perfect, what the verb to be was. used for. And why is that? Because the teachers I had at the time, and they did the best job as they could based on the context that they were. But at that time, they did not tell me why I needed to know the verb to be. How could I use the verb to be? Everything they said was, okay, you have to know that he, she, it, we use is. In the negative, we use isn't. You, we, they, we use are. In the negative, we use aren't. That was all. But then, what's the purpose of learning something if I don't know when, how, and where I'm going to use it? Look, can you see where this is going? You're awfully quiet here in the chat box. I don't see any comments. I am driven by interaction. Please share with me if you agree with what I'm saying. If you disagree, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. Paula said she's digesting. It's a lot to take in. It's definitely a lot to take in. Um, what I always tell my trainees, people who come to my courses, people who've been trained by me over the years, is that you have to find the core of your lesson. And what do I mean by core? It's an acronym. It's communication occurring in real life experiences. So when you think about the verb to be, we can do so much with the verb to be. We can describe people physically. We can share personal information. We can use this to check in a hotel. Everything. That's just some examples of what we can do with the verb to be. And that should be the core of your lesson, not teaching the verb to be. Teaching the verb to be is not the core. Communication should be the core of your lesson. To illustrate that, I prepared a lesson for this webinar specifically. And I'm going to be sharing this lesson with you at the end so you can use this lesson with your students and experiment with what I'm saying. Um, are you familiar with this background? I mean, if you have been on Earth in the past week, you might be familiar with what is happening here. Uh, everyone is talking about the new Disney animation, Inside Out. Have you guys been to the movies? Have you watched it already? I see people from different countries here. There was a person from Bolivia, um, David from Bolivia, and I see from Turkey. So I don't know how things are in Turkey and in Bolivia, but here in Brazil, people are going crazy. Kids are going crazy because of this movie. And I went to the movies a couple of days ago to watch it, and I was beyond impressed. It's amazing. If you have the chance to do this over the weekend, just go. You're gonna love it. But as a teacher and as a materials writer, it got me thinking how I could bring that topic to one of my lessons. And that's what I did. And I was like, I have this webinar for Disal on Friday. What if I plan a lesson to illustrate what I'm trying to share? And here it is. So I'm going to go over the lesson with you, explaining what I would do in these parts. So first thing I would do is I would start my lesson showing my students the trailer and ask them to take notes of answers for these questions. Then after the trailer is over, I would have them talk in pairs. If it's a one-to-one lesson, I would have a conversation with my students to ask them what their answers were to these questions. Then I would move on and go over all these expressions here. Just bear in mind something really important. This is a B1 lesson. Yeah? So when we think about B1, we are looking at intermediate students. Yeah, so it's a B1 plus lesson. So here I have many idiomatic expressions that can be connected with the feelings that they saw in the trailer. So here we have anxiety, we have um, embarrassment, envy, disgust, fear, sadness, joy, uh, anger, and boredom. So I would have them match these expressions to the feelings. That are two expressions for each feeling. Yeah. Then I would go over the expressions, have them repeat and check and so on and so forth. Then I would show them this dialogue. Mind you, although I'm using a Disney Pixar theme, this lesson is not for children. Yeah, because here we are talking about a job interview. So this would be for late teenagers and adults. Yeah. So look at this. George is at a job interview. Read and listen to the conversation. Do you think he got the job? I'm going to play the audio so you can follow the conversation all the way until the end. And you tell me if you think he would get the job here in the chat box, okay? As soon as I press play, can you please tell me if you can listen to the audio?
Now I'll share some situations and I want you to tell me how.
Okay, can you listen to the audio? Okay, wonderful. So there you go.
Now I'll share some situations and I want you to tell me how you would feel, okay?
Sure.
Imagine a manager asked you to deliver a report last minute on Friday afternoon.
Oh, I'd be hot under the collar. Come on, Friday afternoon?
Okay, how about receiving a last minute invitation from a team member to attend a happy hour event?
Well, that's different. I'd be on cloud nine.
I see. What if a less capable peer got a promotion before you? How would that make you feel?
I'm not sure. I think I'd be boiling over at first, but I confess I'd be green with envy later on.
What if your manager asks you to build a complex spreadsheet from scratch?
I'm great at that, but I'd be watching paint dry.
Thanks. Let's talk about your last work experience. Why did you leave?
Oh, don't get me started. I had a rough time in my last job. My boss was a very unkind person. He'd call us out in front of the whole team, and that made me want to crawl under a rock.
That's very uncomfortable indeed.
And there's more. Whenever he wanted to fire someone, he'd let the person waiting the whole day for a conversation. One day he said he wanted to talk to me, and I spent the whole day on pins and needs. When he called my name, I shook like a leaf.
Did he fire you that day?
Not really, but I was on edge, and the first thing I said when I entered his room was, I quit.
So, what do you guys think? Do you think he got the job? Anita said, no, Jose Angelo not. Mara said yes. Yeah, I don't know. He was very he was very straightforward with his answers, right? So then I would have my students discuss if he got the job or not. Then we move on to the actual teaching moment. Yeah, so I got some snippets from the conversation. Imagine a manager asks you to deliver a report last minute on Friday afternoon. I'd be hot under the collar. Come on, Friday afternoon? What if a less capable peer got a promotion before you? I think I'd be boiling over at first, but I confess I'd be green with envy later on. So let me ask you, what language topic am I teaching here? Let me see your answers. Yes, Marina. Marina was the first answer I got here. It is the second conditional. In terms of grammar, I'm teaching the second conditional. Remember I told you about the core of the lesson. What is the core of my lesson here? Am I teaching the second conditional for the sake of grammar? Or am I teaching the second conditional to enable my students to do something? Definitely enable my students to do something. And what is it that I want them to do? I want them to be better able to express how they would react in certain situations. So if you go back to my first slide in this lesson, we had talking about triggers and reactions for certain emotions. That was exactly uh, the core of my lesson. Does that make sense? Can you see how the lesson is unfolding? Yeah. So in this slide, I would teach, I would effectively teach the grammar. I said, hey, do the situations are likely or unlikely to happen? Ah, they are imaginary. Okay. So in terms of grammar, what do we use? Ah, check it out. Look at the examples. What do we use? Ah, we use would. Ah, okay. What else? We use the simple past. Okay, so we have to combine the simple past in one sentence and would in another one. And then I move on, guiding my students through the explanation and having them notice the language patterns instead of simply asking them what instead of simply telling them the second conditional, this is what we use it for. Here's an example exercise. There is very little participation, there is very little activity from the student. Yeah? And in this concept, what I am doing here is I am showing how the language is used before teaching the language. So my students are their first contact with the language is with the language being used, and then they are going to have an explanation of grammatical structure and work on pronunciation and so on and so forth. Then I would bring the conversation again and say, what other sentences follow the same structure? So then I would give my students the chance to look at the conversation again, now with more critical eyes, and have them find other examples of the second conditional in the text. After this, I would have them complete the sentences here. And here they would have to complete using the expressions from the pink boxes, but they would have to adapt, right? If I received $1 million, I would be walking on air. If her mom found out she's walking alone in the streets, she'd be, I don't know, she'd have her heart in her mouth, or she'd be shaking like a leaf. Yeah? Then, after that, I would have a quick speaking practice here. How would you feel in these situations above? Sorry, a typo here. I'm gonna get it fixed. How would you feel? How would you feel in the situations above? Talk to a partner, and here I give them the prompts. How would you feel if you received $1 million? I'd feel blah blah blah. How about you? How would you feel if you knew how dangerous how dangerous I don't know how dangerous downtown is? Oh, I would be shaking like a leaf and whatever. Then I'll give my students a chance, another chance to use the language in a freer way by playing a tic-tac-toe. Yeah. They would have to complete the sentences to mark the space. So I'd be watching paint dry if, and then they would have to complete in order um, to mark a space here in the tic-tac-toe. Then finally, I would have a speaking task to wrap up my lesson. So student A interviews B for a job position. Create many hypothetical situations and ask B to answer how they would feel and how they would react. Then student B answers the questions A asks you. Do your best to get the job. So um, if we look back to my lesson, let me let me open this here. Let me go back to my older slides. If I go back to if we go back if we look back on the lesson, can you see where and how the core of the lesson is working for me and for my learners? Can you see uh, how clear this communication in real life is happening? What do you guys think? Can you tell me here in the comments below? Do you think this would work? Do you feel a little bit insecure? How is that doing for you? Yes, Paula, this would be a 1 hour lesson. 1 hour lesson. Don't be ashamed. Come on, Anita. That's not what I want. That's definitely not how I want you to feel. Um, Keeping the pace of the lesson, Paula, is something that we have to be very mindful about. We have to be very straightforward. Yeah, there's not a lot of time to side conversation. It's just okay. Let's do this. Go, 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 go. Yeah, but you can definitely fit this into an hour, 1 hour and 15 minutes. Um, so what am I telling you here? Um, what am I telling you guys here with this approach? What I'm saying is that instead of bringing only the grammar points and just teaching them the grammar and grammatical structures is not enough. Because if it were enough, uh, we would have learned the verb to be back at school. Yeah, we have we need to have communication. We need to show our students how the language works, but most importantly, why they are going to learn that specific topic. Why am I teaching my students the passive voice? Why am I teaching my students reported speech? Does that make sense? And in terms of the lesson structure, let's look back on what happened. I had a lead-in. My students watched the video and answered, talked about the questions. They knew they were gonna talk about their feelings. So the lead-in is the moment in which we contextualize the lesson we are teaching. Then we had a moment of skills development. So we had a listening exercise, a reading exercise. You had to read the conversation and tell me if they would get the job, and have a discussion if they would get the job or not, and why not. Then we had the moment of language clarification, where I got the samples from the text to explain more about the second conditional, to explore more about the grammatical structure and how they could use that. We had the moments of language practice for our students to practice the language, use those expressions that we taught them. So notice that in this lesson, I'm not only teaching the second conditional, I'm teaching a lot more, right? I taught them expressions to express their feelings. I had a listening practice. I had a reading um, uh, practice. Yeah, and then finally, I would have, after all the language practices, the fill in the blanks, the tic tac toe, the pair work, I would have a real life task, which is the last exercise in which students um, would have to role play a job interview. And there are some very interesting comments here in the chat box. I'm going to address them. Paula said, do you eventually name the grammatical structure and mention the second conditional? Yes, in the language clarification stage. After I tell them what it is and how we use it, I tell them, said, hey, this is called the second conditional. Because some students, they feel the need to go home and do some research and have more practice, or eventually watch a video on YouTube on the topic. I've had students who would always do that after class to help them um, better understand the language and to improve their self-studying skills. So definitely share the grammar topic you're teaching with your students, the name of what you're teaching to our students, and give them the power to do some research, give them the power to own their learning process as well. Because with all the access, all the information, all the technology that we have today, I mean, they could be looking for tips on how to use the second conditional on TikTok or on YouTube or on a blog post, right? Why not? If we have all this information out there, why not share this power to look for this information with our students? We should always do that as much as we can. Um, Adriana said, I think students feel more comfortable when we approach language this way. I agree. I agree. Not only do they feel more comfortable, more confident with the language, they also feel more comfortable with sharing and with speaking because the context of the lesson is very clear, right? We know that we are talking about emotions. We've known that from the very beginning. So they would definitely feel that because the context is very limited, they would feel that they have everything they need to talk about emotions. They have the expressions that we taught them in the beginning of the lesson, they have the grammatical structure, they have life experience to share what they want to say. So, definitely, they would definitely feel not only more confident, but also more comfortable. Yeah, it's all about promoting a safe space. When we think about promoting a safe space in the classroom, we're not only looking at bullying and all that, we are also looking at giving our students the tool for them to feel safe while speaking. Yeah, and that sometimes is giving them language support. So, any other questions so far? How is this? How did this go to you? Thank you, Paula. So before you go, I'm going to share with you my Instagram account here on the chat box. I'm also sharing ideas and lessons and everything. So if you want to connect with me, if you took pictures or print screens of of the session today, tag me. I'm gonna love to hear what you have to say. If you have questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me. And would you like to have that lesson from the Disney movie from Inside Out? All right. So let me share this with you here. So can you see the button that it shows up on top of my slides that says get access to the lesson? Okay, so just click there. It's gonna ask for your email, then you're gonna receive an email with the link to have on my slides. I have a few tweaks to make, but the slide is always online. So any changes I make, you're going to be able to see this live. Yeah. I would like to thank Giselle for this space, for this invitation, to be speaking at the very last webinar of the semester. I would like to thank all of you for being here with me today. Hopefully, we're gonna have another chance next semester. And for those of you who are in Brazil, we have the Brastisol International Conference happening in July. I don't know if you are familiar with the Brastisol International Conference. Brastisol is the biggest it's the biggest association of English teachers in Brazil. And every July we have a conference. And this year the conference is going to be in Goiânia. So if you would like to know more, make sure you look for Brastisol on Instagram. I'm going to share this here. Uh, Brastisol on Instagram. Oh, you were saying that you got two different sets of slides. Why is that? Let me. Well, don't worry. I'm going to, if you filled in the form, I'm going to email the slides to you. Okay? So just make sure you fill in the form and I'm going to re-email everything. And to wrap it up, as I was saying, if you are going to the Brastisol International Conference in Goiânia, if you are from Goiânia and you haven't heard about it, check Brastisol's profile. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be delivering this talk in Goiânia at the Congress. So you got a spoiler of what I'm going to be talking about, but it's going to be a pleasure to have you there with me. Thank you very, very, very much. Giselle, thank you again for all the opportunity. and I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you again. I'll see you. Bye bye.